Failed by the mental health system, this woman is carrying her mother's head in a bag. Years later, she will have no recollection of the crime and believe her mother is still alive. Odessa Carey is 36 years old. She lives in Northumberland, England, and has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She has struggled with her mental health for most of her life. Her mother, also called Odessa, is a very supportive, loving and caring mother. She's always there to reassure her daughter. Odessa Jr., or Dessa as she was sometimes known to family and friends, was a very caring and loving woman. She would never intentionally hurt someone, but she did need a lot of support from mental health services. Her mother, Odessa Sr., battled cancer in the early 2001. During this time, her daughter, Dessa, became very close to a family friend, Sharon, and from 2006, Dessa and Sharon were a couple. In May 2018, Odessa Jr. is sectioned in a psychiatric ward after attacking her mother. Less than 1 year later, in early 2019, she is discharged. She has no money, no job, so is just wandering the streets aimlessly. She ends up moving back in with her mother. Even though her mother has been warned not to be alone with her daughter, she can't just turn her daughter away, so Odessa Jr. moves back in. Sharon, the girlfriend, says that during this period there were clear warning signs of how dangerous Odessa Jr. could be. On one occasion, she cut her legs all the way down to the bone. In another incident, she tried to smash through the walls of her home to get to the neighbouring family, who she believed was going to kill her. Weeks before murdering her mother, she killed a cat by breaking its neck and tried to flush it down the toilet. Sharon later described how Odessa's behaviour was concerning. She would sit in the kitchen just kind of giggling to herself, and when asked what she was laughing at, she would say, "The voices in my head." The family believed that Odessa had stopped taking her medication, but were unsure what to do. April of 2019, and John Murray, an old family friend of Odessa's father, returns from the pub to his allotment, where he has a shed in which he lives. Odessa Jr. would occasionally pop by, have a beer and a chat with John, and when he entered the shed that day, Odessa was there. She had let herself in. She was using baby wipes to clean her arms and hands of what looked like blood, although John couldn't see where the injury was or where the blood was coming from. John said she appeared to be in a good mood, but she kept kind of nodding off, so was obviously very tired. She then reached for a blue bag that she had with her. She pulled out a towel and a pillowcase, from which she then pulled out a human head. She lifted this head up, kissed it on the forehead, and placed it back into the bag. John said he didn't recognise the head at the time and he had no idea what to do. He didn't have a mobile phone, Odessa didn't have her mobile phone, and his closest friends were down the pub, and he didn't particularly want to leave Odessa alone. So he tried keeping her there. They were sat there drinking for an hour or so until Odessa finally left. John sat there in his shed for a while and then returned to the pub. He told an acquaintance down there what had happened, saying, "I've had a queer day." The guy just didn't believe him. He was like, "No way, that's happened." So then John kind of didn't believe himself. I think if something so horrific and bizarre like that has happened to you, you begin to question what was real. And so John didn't really think anything of it. He tried to convince himself that it didn't really happen. The next day, John bumped into Sharon, Odessa's girlfriend, and he told her what had happened. She immediately phoned police. On the 8th of April 2019, 2 police officers arrive at the 73-year-old mother's house, Odessa Carey. They enter the home and find her headless corpse on the bed. Her abdomen had been sliced in the shape of a cross. When they entered the bathroom, they discovered a bucket in which contained the victim's brain and blood. Also in the bathtub were scissors, knives and a mallet, all of which had been attempted to be cleaned. When forensics arrived, they determined that Odessa Carey Sr. had been struck on the head with a mallet. This had caused her death, and then subsequently she had been beheaded using scissors and knives. Her head had then been brought into the bathroom where the perpetrator had removed her brain. At this point, Odessa Jr. is still walking around the streets carrying her mother's head in a bag. She visits family and friends and then finally tries to hide in someone's house. Police arrive and find her hiding in the loft. They search this house and then find Odessa Carey Sr.'s head under the kitchen sink. It is very obvious that Odessa Jr. is suffering from psychosis. She has broken completely from reality, and when police begin questioning her, she starts to say, "That's not my mum, it's someone else. My mum disappeared 4 years ago." Months after being discharged from a psychiatric ward, this patient has ended up murdering her mother. How and why did this happen? After being discharged from the psychiatric ward, concerns were raised by the community mental health team due to the fact that no discharge meeting had been arranged, no real accommodation had been secured for Odessa. They found her a bed at an old fire station. This wasn't ideal. Odessa Carey was a vulnerable woman, and these places attracted all sorts, and she could have been easily exploited. Also, this bed was simply that. It was only accessible at night time. So during the day, Odessa Carey had nowhere to go. She was just wandering the streets. It was also noted that Odessa herself was angry that she didn't have a place to stay. She had no benefits set up. How was she going to survive? She wasn't even registered with a GP. So someone with serious mental health conditions has no registered doctor. So initially Odessa did want to be discharged, but after a while she contacted the crisis team saying she's not coping, she's not happy, she needs help. Initially nothing was done, and then she was placed on a waiting list for treatment. Not only was her living situation unacceptable, health workers also knew that Odessa had repeated delusions, specifically around her mother. She began telling health workers that she believed her mother was an imposter. In the months leading up to the murder, Odessa's mother expressed concern about her daughter. She was frightened of her. Odessa Jr. had become increasingly threatening towards her, and she said she needed help. These statements just weren't taken seriously, and nothing was done. In a review after this case was brought to light, it was acknowledged that there was a limited understanding of the relationship between Carey and her mother, with inadequate exploration of the belief repeatedly expressed by Carey that her mother had been replaced by an imposter. The investigation afterwards also highlighted numerous significant failings in this case. Odessa's girlfriend Sharon made contact with a friend of hers in Manchester. She had been receiving text messages from Odessa 18 months prior to the murder, saying that she believed all of her family and friends were clones. Odessa Sr.'s children say they have been failed by mental health services. Their mother was a great, caring, loving woman who would go out of her way to help anyone, but she was brutally and violently killed. Odessa Jr. was deemed too unwell to enter a plea and unfit to stand trial. So after a trial of facts, the jury were asked to decide whether they thought Odessa was responsible or not responsible for her mother's death. They decided that Odessa Jr. was responsible for her mother's death. The judge sentenced Odessa to be sent to a psychiatric ward, where to this day she still believes that her mother is alive and simply missing. The judge stated that the defendant is acutely psychotic. It is likely that the diagnosis is one of psychosis. She suffers from paranoid delusional beliefs. She does not believe that the body was that of her mother. She is acutely unwell. So far, all attempts to treat her have not been successful. Her girlfriend Sharon says that she will stick by her to the very end, stating that Odessa Jr. needs really good professional help. She hopes that the psychiatrists at the hospital can get through to her. This is a story where a family has been tragically failed by the system, which has resulted in the death of their mother and the subsequent incarceration into a psychiatric ward of their sister. An incredibly sad case, illustrating what can go wrong when people are not heard. That was the case of Odessa Carey. This was another suggestion from TikTok. If you have any suggestions, please DM me. As always, if you like my content, please remember to like, subscribe and comment, and I'll see you in the next one.